I was relocating across Texas, and, as I normally do, was driving through the night to skip traffic and because it was more serene that way. I was driving straight through central Texas, going northwest, so seeing the hill country change to desert in the full moon was super cool. Anyways, I was driving with my now ex-wife, and we were running low on gas. Luckily, we were pulling up into a tiny no-name town, and we could see an old gas station come around the bend. This encounter happened at about 2 a.m. Now, this town only has one road, and this station was right at the edge of town at the end of it. When I say old, I mean very old. The type that you have no option of prepaying. You simply flip up the handle on the machine and you hear the pump inside start struggling to get the gas from the reservoir. It had the old style tick readers too, not one electrical thing on it. I, being the young man I was, had never seen one before, so I walked into the store to buy the gas before I pumped. The store only had one light on in the far back, and I almost thought it was closed since it was barely brighter inside than it was out in the moonlight. Upon entering, I saw the place was deserted. No customers, no workers, nothing. However, there was an odd tune playing on someone's radio that I couldn't place. An old sounding upbeat piano piece was playing somewhere around the corner inside, and I heard shuffling once I walked closer to the source. This made me feel scared. Not the, whoa, this is creepy scared, but the all hairs are on end, something is seriously wrong here, but I can't figure it out, scared. As I turned a corner, I saw a young man standing next to a large radio and dancing. His dancing, though, was extremely off-putting and seriously didn't match the tune at all. Though the radio was cranking out what sounded like ragtime, this guy was running his hands up and down his body and pretty much feeling himself, with his eyes closed in what looked like bliss. He was going far slower than the music and definitely wasn't on tempo. For some reason, I couldn't speak. I couldn't even move. I was in a trance as every part of me screamed to turn and leave. Finally, I said, "Excuse me, I just need some gas." The guy kept dancing. I said it a little louder, and he finally slowed down a bit and opened his eyes and focused on me. But it was like he was looking at a finely cooked steak. He was almost looking through me, and I silently walked to the register, not saying anything. I said, $20 please. He, again, didn't say anything and just stood behind the ancient register. So I just figured maybe he didn't speak the language or was embarrassed I caught him dancing. So I laid the money on the counter and went outside, hoping he'd turn on the pump. I filled my car up, told my wife about the weird ass scene in there, and turned off the pump to kill the horrible grinding noise from the interior pump fighting against gravity to get the gas up. Weird thing is, when we were leaving, I looked back in the window and the guy was still standing there behind the corner. This may sound fine, but my money was still on the counter in front of him. It was like he was a robot who just turned off once I left. This is where it gets super weird. A couple months later, I was driving back to San Antonio to visit my family, and we'd figured we'd stop at the old gas station to see it in the daytime, since it had become somewhat of a running joke between us. We pulled up into this tiny town, and the thing was gone. The lot it sat on at the end of the road wasn't even there. It was just grass. No rubble, no old pump, no lighting, nothing. It was like somebody picked it up and moved it. It looked like nothing had been there for years. I still get freaked out thinking about it. A group of friends and I decided to take a small Saturday afternoon road trip into the backcountry of South Carolina. We'd figured we'd just drive around, head southwest, and see if we could find some antique shops, cemeteries, abandoned buildings, and the like. We piled into my car and start driving. It's about an hour of nothing, just some light conversation and southern pine forests. We passed a few horse farms, some quaint old mill towns, and a few gas stations, but nothing interesting yet. 2 p.m. rolls around, and we decide we want to get something to eat. As a rule, we always like to try local diners and restaurants, so we kept driving until we saw a faded road sign for a town. It was about 5 miles down the road, and we figured that's good enough. As we're driving through the town, we notice there's no one out. No cars on the roads, no people on the streets, and no real houses. The streets are lined with abandoned and boarded up warehouses, shops with broken windows, and a few broken down cars from the 90s. The further we go, the worse it gets. We finally get to a diner that's right off their main street. It looks like there's about 10 people eating inside, and there's a few cars in a parking lot. Seems like they're open. Here's where it starts to get weird. We open a door and step in. As soon as we clear the threshold, everyone stares at us. It's like in movies where the record scratches in the old jukebox and everyone looks, except far more uncomfortable. In the middle of the diner is a large table with 6 people around it, who all turn back to their food and start whisper talking. The waitress nervously shuffles up to us and quietly asks how many. My friend Chris takes the lead and says 4 in just a normal speaking voice. Everybody looks at us again, and the waitress, who looks barely older than 16, recoils, but takes us to our table. She sat us in a basic 4-top near the large table in the middle. She takes our drink orders and leaves. Once she goes, we all whisper about how weird that was. While we're talking, the line cook is just staring at us with this violent look in his eyes. We all figured out what we want and wait. We all sit in awkward silence for about 10 minutes before the waitress comes back. She takes our orders and disappears in the back of the diner, leaving us alone in a dining room with the people on the other table. It gives us some time to look them over. They're a basic southern family. Chubby, haggard-looking wife, husband with sun leather skin and oil stains on his coveralls. 3 children, all girls, all in nice Sunday dresses. The other woman was dressed like the younger girls but looked very much in her 40s. She wore a red, paisley patterned dress with frilled lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was long and stringy and covered the bulk of her round face. To the left of her was a doll, seated in a high chair for babies. The woman would sometimes lean in towards the doll and whisper something, then giggle. Soon, the waitress dropped food off at their table, but set a meal down for the doll too. She commented on how pretty the woman's daughter was and left. About 10 minutes later, she came back with our food, silently left it, gave us the side eye, and walked away. The waitress came back to refill the other table's water, where she asked everyone how the food was, but asked the doll too. When she asked the doll, she spoke in a baby voice. The woman then picked up the doll, held it in front of her face, and spoke in a little girl's voice. She was speaking for the doll. My other friend looked at me with the most terrified, wide-eyed expression. She worked with disturbed children as a therapist in a court-mandated facility. We shoveled our mediocre food down, and my friend Chris just dumped $40 on the table and we left. As we were leaving the town, Chris was looking for any sort of town name. I was checking to make sure we weren't being followed. This happened about 6 years ago, and we still can't find that town. No one remembers the name or the road it was off of, but we remember being there and what the diner looked like. A few years ago, I was driving home from Florida to Pennsylvania with 3 of my friends. It was late, probably between 1 to 3 a.m., and we were somewhere in North Carolina. We needed gas soon, so we agreed to take the next exit off the highway that had a gas station. The second I took the exit, it was pitch black. There was no streetlights along the exit ramp or on the roads up ahead. The only lights in the area came from my headlights and the lights from the freeway behind us. The sheer darkness was enough to creep me out, especially because my vision isn't the best to begin with, but it really sucks when it's dark. But we really needed gas, so we pressed on. While driving to the gas station, the only building we saw was a massive, old-looking church. We drove by a sign informing us that we were in a town, but there was no businesses or houses other than a church. When we finally got to the gas station, we saw an assortment of giant farm animal statues outside the building, standing tall and barely illuminated. They weren't fenced off, and there were no signs explaining why they were there, so if it's considered an attraction, it's a confusing one at best. However, the weirdest thing happened inside the gas station. With me on this trip was one other girl and 2 guys. We had all been friends for years, and our dynamic includes making fun of each other a lot, but never deliberately messing with each other's head. At this point in our trip, we were all tired and eager to get home. The gas station itself was huge on the inside, filled to the brim with shelves, all of which were jam-packed with an assortment of junk food and junk items. In hindsight, this seems weird given how empty the town was, but at the time, we were all distracted by just how much stuff this gas station held. The other girl and I went to the restroom while the 2 guys paid for gas. The restrooms were hard to get to, as there were boxes piled just outside the door, and the sign just had a piece of paper with "women" scrawled across it in green highlighter. Upon leaving the restroom, we saw one of our friends entering the men's restroom, also marked by a piece of paper with "men" written in highlighter. He gave us a weird look as he entered. but we shrugged it off and walked towards our other friend, who we could see standing at a shelf a bit away. He was facing away from us, and as we approached, I started to get a bad feeling in my stomach. As we got closer, he turned and gave us the most sinister look I've ever seen. Alarm bells were going off in my head at this point, and my female friend and I proceed to the car, unsure of what to make of the interaction we just had. The second we stepped outside and looked towards the gas pumps, we saw the same two friends we had just seen standing behind us. The one who entered the bathroom was leaning casually against the car, while the one who gave us a sinister look was finishing up pumping gas. My female friend and I were dumbfounded and asked them how they were standing in front of us when they were both just behind us a few seconds ago, and they looked at us like we had multiple heads. After paying for gas, the two immediately went back out to the car, as the gas station gave off too weird of a vibe to wait in there for us. Sufficiently creeped out, we piled back into the car and noped the fuck out of there. I'm not sure why we saw two of my friends' doppelgangers in a gas station, or why the doppelgangers seemed to be in such a pissy mood, and I'm not sure why the gas station had a collection of farm animal statues outside of it. I'm pretty content never going there again though. That place definitely should not exist.